Without the high-grade.
He could recite the telephone book and people would be fascinated.
Lecture man, very well-read man, and you feel a little bit small, I think.
Tom, can we just comb you? Oh, darling, no, sorry, I'm too busy, I'm saving the universe.
Something that Garbo-like has kept itself shrouded in mystery for the best part of life.
He is an alien. Tom Baker was born an alien.
Larger than life, manic. He's like Eddie Izzard on speed. You know,
the atmosphere on Doctor Who with Tom could be fraught.
There's a faint loneliness about him and a sort of a power.
Say, good morning, good morning. Is it a good morning? Yes, it is. It's a wonderful morning. You know.
When Tom started the role, it was 1974. It was 10 years after the programme had begun. It would be nearly 10 years before it came to an end. He occupies that huge sort of central ground there. He is the icon. He is for so many people Doctor Who. There is simply no other. I think he occupies that big space. If you ask anyone to identify Doctor Who, they don't identify William Hartnell, they don't identify Patrick Troughton, they identify the guy with the long scarf, big curly hair and jelly babies.
He was brilliant. He was never less than brilliant.
He was my hero, and still is.
He's very much like a father figure, I think, to millions of people.
I was sort of early teens and Tom was just incredible, this sort of anti-establishment figure, full of energy, bouncing around, sort of like Tigger personified. He was an incredible performance.
I know Barry saw an enormous number of people, you know, because that's the most important decision you make, is in casting the Doctor, getting the right Doctor. And he saw a lot of people on the terms of, not I am offering you this job, but would you like to come and talk to me to see whether you and I both think you would like this job, you see. And he saw a lot of people with kind of that in mind. Nobody he felt was quite right, and then somebody, I think from somebody within the BBC suggested Tom Baker as a possibility. And Tom was then appearing in a movie called something like Son of Sinbad or The Seventh Adventure of Sinbad, one of those. It was a Hollywood Eastern, you know, Carliffs and Vargas and Wicked Viziers and all that stuff. And Barry and I went round to see it at the Hammersmith Odeon. And Tom was playing the Wicked Magician or something. He was playing the bad guy. But it was a very good, strong performance, you know, and Barry liked it, and I liked it, we both liked it very much. And from then on, Barry got into contact with Tom, who I think was then working on a building site, or so he said, you know, in one of his resting periods, you might call it. And it all kind of went on from there.
Well, first of all, I didn't know. I knew John was leaving before he actually left. Even when I joined, I knew that he was going. And then all these names kept being put into the melting pot. I think Jim Dale was mentioned, Ron Moody, and then Barry Letts, the director, came rushing in one day. He said, "Wonderful," he said, "we've got Tom Baker." And in my ignorance, I didn't know who Tom Baker was. So I had nothing to sort of gauge it by. And the first time I actually saw Tom was when we were filming Spiders, and we were filming John Dr. Demise, and it was the takeover. So it wasn't a time to really say very much. John was in his own little box with "I am leaving," and the scene was meant to be quite upsetting. Liz, as Sarah, had to be upset that she thought Dr. John was dying. And all I did was hello, shake hands and lay down, goodbye, off. And then that night I had to go down to film with them. I'd finished the studio, but I was also filming with Tom. And I really wanted, you have to, if something works well, I think you get that extra freeze on screen, you see it. And I thought, it's so important, I mustn't push anything. You know, it has to come naturally. And Ian Marter was there with Tom when I went down filming, and they seemed already to have a really lovely relationship. And I actually felt very excluded. And I thought, well, I just have to sit back and wait on this. And everyone was sort of very, very low-key, and everyone had a job to do. But from the word go, it was new, very, very new Doctor, which was lovely. Because you are only as good as the people you work with. And the Doctor makes the running. It's like in a George Formby scene. You can't have 10 George Formbys. It wouldn't work. So all I could do was wait to see what Tom gave me, be the Sarah that John knew. And then when Tom came along, and he gave me this whole new scope of Sarah. Whereas John's doctor had been very protective, arm around the chick. Tom's doctor was, just get out, you can do it, do it. Oh, right, thanks, doctor. And it was wonderful. Now, Tom comes from Liverpool, as I do, so I don't know if there's meant to be a Liverpool humour. He's so funny. And he is so generous and disarming, and it was great.
What we were looking for always was this star quality thing, which is not necessarily linked with good, great or even good acting, though it can be, but it's a separate thing. Tom himself in a way summed it up about John, in which he said he was like a very tall light bulb, which is lovely because, and the thing is that when Pertwee was on the screen, you watched him, and John, bless him, although he was a good actor, was not, in some ways the greatest actor in the world, but he had this charisma. And that, if you get him being a good actor, which I think Tom is, that's a bonus. But that's not what you go for first. You don't really want Alec Guinness, or something like that. You want somebody who's going to knock your eye out the minute he comes on. And Tom has got this kind of enormous vitality about him, which is there in real life. And I think that's really what was the deciding factor, as much as anything else. He's very tall, he's got these curly hair, he's got these wide staring blue eyes, and the general sort of innocent at large air, I always used to say, if you'd say to Tom, something like good morning, he'd say, good morning, good morning. Is it a good morning? Yes, it is, it's a wonderful morning, and all this would come across at you, and that was really the quality we were after. And I was able from the beginning to write it into the script of The New Doctor. And the thing, of course, obviously about Robot is it's a regeneration story when you've got the Doctor for the first time. And what I used was this quality that when the Doctor first comes out of regeneration, he's a bit unbalanced in one way or another. And so I made him actually kind of quite wild and eccentric and very, very strange. The scenes where he's tiptoeing about in his nightgown, trying to find the TARDIS. Or the scenes with Harry, where Harry Sullivan tries to get him to go back to bed, and it was and I think Tom comes across, really, really well in those scenes, and I thought if they feel it's too extreme, they can calm him down a bit afterwards, which I think they did. But I wrote him very eccentric and very strange to begin with in the first story.
You get some of them when they start are encouraged to do, play yourself, play yourself, play yourself. But I think when you get to the last episode, Sylvester McCoy, he starts off doing that, but it's only to fill a vacuum. But eventually they find a particular way of writing for the character and so on. But I think Tom wrote himself. I think something really special happened there. Something you're not going to see very often. I mean, that was unique. I don't think you're going to get that blurring of the two very often ever again, really.
It just worked, and it just got better and better and better. And by the time we came to do Planet of Evil, I think it was, we knew we were really flying. You just had that feel. I don't know where it came from. The people around you, the technicians, anyone, you just knew all of a sudden this was really good. And that is a very, very rare feeling. And when something is really good, you dare to be brave, you dare to make mistakes, and by that you get a better result because you're just braver. You trust the people around you.
The first impression of Tom was, what I particularly remember with a great deal of pleasure, is that we used to go out in the town sometimes together after rehearsal, and he came and stayed the night with me once, as a matter of fact, because at that time I think he was a bit peripatetic and didn't have any particular place in mind to go to, we didn't want to. And so he came to stay the night with me, and I brought him back. I think my wife was in bed, or wasn't. I can't remember whether she... Anyway, I said, come on, Tom, come and stay the night. And the kids sort of rushed into the bathroom first thing in the morning to be faced by Tom in the bath, Didn't face Tom at all, he sort of big grin. And the children came in, and sort of a little puzzled, because they'd gone to bed by the time we got back, and a little puzzled by this, but took it in their stride eventually. That's my first fond memory of Tom, is the fact that he and I were seen in various hostelries from time to time. But what I like very much also, I think it was great fun in Robot indeed, and he came out in all the different costumes. This one, that one, and the Briggs sort of saying, no, I don't think so, or yes, or no, I'm sure he said no to all of the Briggs probably. So that was my first memory of Tom.
Throughout his first season, you can sense that he's being written for, although there is certainly a lot of leeway being given for him to sort of fill in a lot of blanks and so on. But there comes a point where you move beyond like this completely fictional construction, and you get a sort of edge being brought to it. There's a big speech in his fourth story, which is Genesis of the Daleks, which has become which is a big favourite of all the fans. It's one of those pivotal moments where he's asking if he has the right to destroy the Daleks. And if you look at that, you can sort of sense there's something special coming along here. So this is something that, you know, William Hartnell, Paddy Troughton and John Pope would never have done. The first, second and third would never have done. They'd never have actually questioned their motives and their ethics.
I can remember meeting Tom in the foyer of BBC Television Centre just after I'd finished writing Robot and delivered the scripts, you know, and Tom had read them and was sort of coming up to rehearsals, you know. And I met him, you know, I was obviously wondering how, you know, people were going to feel about it, and he said, I like your script very much. And I said, you know, for some reason, oh, well, I suppose you had to say that. And he said, no, I didn't have to say it, I do like them, you know. And he was, you know, and he was very good in that first part, you know.
Well, I was born in 1934 in Liverpool, so I was a child at the outbreak of war. My father was in the services during the whole war, and I spent my childhood not going to school very much because of the war. Liverpool was one of the cities that was bombed, and that was really about it. No achievement in education at all, none at all. And I think it was my lack of achievement in education that made me restless to try and go in some other direction, because in those days, as to some extent now, but more so in those days, the only way out for poor families was through education. And with no educational achievement, I was really hidebound and had to find some other way. My mother was very religious, and somebody came to school one day looking for heroes, asking for people who wanted to do splendid and fine things, and I put my hand up. I always wanted to do something fine and splendid, and that led me into a monastery. With movies, the first movie I ever did, I don't think it was ever released. The first movie I ever did was in the 60s sometime. It was called A Winter's Tale. It was a film of the Shakespeare play. Lawrence Harvey was the star, and I played the bear. And nothing much happened to that. But that was an accident. It was a very successful stage play that an American organization attempted to turn into a film. It didn't really work out. That's how I got started. When I got the part, there was no rush for the designs to come through, and the designer became a friend of mine, and we used to go out for weeks, about 5 or 6 weeks. We used to go out and play, dressing up in various costumiers in London at the BBC. We had access to all those places, and we used to go out and we weren't rushing it, and we used to dress up, and I used to dance about, and Jim was amused, Jim Atchison was amused, and finally emerged this sort of end of a century, slightly boho, crazy costume, which we liked. The scarf was a delicious little accident of us buying too much wool, and the lady was so excited to be working with the BBC, the lady we hired after we'd chosen the colours, knitted up all the wool. We didn't know anything about wool or knitting, and when we got to pick up the scarf, it was 20 feet long, and another little accident, and that stuck. So I did have lots of problems with the scarf. I kept falling over, or people used to think it was a tremendous wheeze to stand on my scarf when someone shouted action. And of course in wet weather it used to get longer. But the BBC never left in the tripping up sequences. I regret that. I've been keen on crossword puzzles for a long time. I'm not very good at them, but I'm very enthusiastic, and I particularly like doing them with a loving friend. And one day, the Times crossword is the puzzle that everyone does in England. Not everyone, but that's the puzzle. A lot of actors do it. Actors are very good at crossword puzzles because they spend so much time standing about. And one day I was waiting for the setup, and I was actually sitting down in a country road. with the dog K9 next to me, and I was doing the Times crossword puzzle, and I knew that John Leeson, my chum who did the voiceover, was actually in a scanner wagon. And quite innocently, I said to him, "Do you think that 1 across is an anagram?" And John, being much cleverer and quicker than I am, answered in the voice of K9 and gave me what 1 across was. And then he told me about 1 down, and he got a quote from Twelfth Night or something. And a group of people standing around were simply stupefied by this. People are really very easily influenced. We should have filmed that.
So I was absolutely petrified. I remember very clearly my journey on the tube the morning of the first day. And sitting there, I have never been so frightened and excited in my life. And I remember arriving at the read-through, and Tom was late. And so we were all sitting around the table waiting for the read-through to begin. And he stalked in his Mac, in his brown Mac. And I was physically shaking. It was extraordinary, extraordinarily frightening, surreal. It was a surreal first day to be in Doctor Who. But maybe, as Doctor Who is so surreal itself, that's not a bad tenor to approach it with.
You didn't almost have to finish sentences. We would put little things in. Tom would say, we would rehearse. By the time we came to the studio, we had to know exactly what we were doing, exactly where the marks were, exactly how many seconds to pause, because the thing that was really important was the special effects. You can do a scene 20, 30 times, you can be wonderful. If the stun gun doesn't work, you ain't got nothing. So you knew the shot they would take would be the one where, you know, if it was a special effect, that would work. So you were on the ball, but Tom used to say, "Oh, sir," so he'd look up to the director's box, he said, "Call them sir, they like that." So, now, Liz and I have just thought of that, and he'd say, "Oh, lovely idea, Tom. No, sorry." It used to come down through the floor manager's thing. No, Tom, it's a wonderful idea. I'm afraid we haven't got time." All right, and he'd say, "Come on, we'd do it," but we had to get it right if we did it. A point, an example, was in Pyramids of Mars. Do you remember in the Marx Brothers film, 3 Marx Brothers come along, they see something, and they simultaneously all turn around and just walk out of shot again. I don't know what I'm saying. Walk in, turn, walk out. And we did that in Pyramids of Mars when we saw something in one of the tunnels. It was meant to be a mini scene there, and said, "Oh, Sarah, quick, hide." And Tom said, "Oh, I'm not saying that bloody line again." In, turn, and it had to be timed. And, you know, yes, it was accepted, yes, it was very good, but if we got it wrong, it wouldn't have been very popular, because the clock ticks around, it waits for no man. And you only have till 10 o'clock, or in those days too. We used to do a record from 7:30 at night till 10 o'clock at night. So it was rather like curtain up. You didn't do rehearse record when I worked on it. In the olden days, they did latterly.
Tom doesn't take prisoners, and the fact that I was this, no doubt, immensely irritating, but sweet and I think unaffected kid, he didn't give me any leeway at all. It was the most terrifying day of my life. And I wanted him to be really, I wanted him to love me. I wanted him to think, "Oh, what a wonderful boy. Oh, what a gifted lad. Oh, you're totally..." I've never wanted anybody to like me so much in my entire life. "Oh, please like me, Tom." And that first day, he didn't really speak to me. He was sort of, he stalked into this rehearsal, to this read-through late, and sat there in his brown raincoat and read the thing and smoked cigarettes. Chain smoked, if I remember right, I don't know. And I was absolutely terrified, but because of the Jeffrey Milan thing, it also seemed to me like it sort of confirming the sort of glamour of it as well. I think it would be appalled to hear me say this, but to me, as a sort of middle-class kid, middle-class sort of kid from Commuterville, it was just unbelievably. You know, I'd never been away from my parents for more than 2 weeks at a time, and there I was working with this frightening man, tall, larger-than-life man. And as I say, on the first day, he really didn't acknowledge me very much. I tried to stand near him in the pub. I remember he went to the pub in lunchtime, so I went to the pub in the lunch. I thought, "Oh, he's going to the pub, well, I'll go to the pub. Tom goes to the pub, I'll do." And I stood at the pub, wanting him to see me. And I think I sort of edged sort of a little nearer along the bar, so I was sort of only 2 people away from him, standing there, you know, sort of, "Here I am, Tom Baker, you got to say hello to me." And he didn't anyway, and so I went back. And we got back to rehearsal. And we had to do a scene together. He said, hello, I haven't said hello to you, have I? And I said, hello, hi. I thought, I said hello, he likes me. He smiled at me. That's a Tom Baker smile. And, oh, fab, he likes me, oh great. And then I made some suggestion about something, or so I had some thought. I said, oh, why don't we try that? And he said, look, why don't you piss off? I thought, oh, that's not a very good start, is it? Oh, he doesn't like me after all. So I went home, sort of distraught. Oh, God, he doesn't my hero, he's my favourite actor in the world. He doesn't like me. He thinks I'm horrible. So that was my first day.
I mean, when he sees me in the kilt, which is, and Liz and Tom collapse with laughter, Brigham's kilt.
I think you can see how well received Tom was in the States when you look at the TV movie that was made last year with American backing to try and relaunch the series. If you look at Paul McGann's characterisation, it's so much like Tom. It's like an updated Tom, like the Tim Burton Batman was to the 60s TV series Batman. It's that sort of just almost a little bit sort of grim, a little bit gritty, a little bit sort of harder in many respects without those sort of campy edges. But you've still got the sort of the glittering, darting sort of intellect. You've still got the little moments, the little sort of there's a bit where he suddenly sort of runs off after his own shoes, that sort of thing. And it's just it's that's so much like Tom, and I can't believe that's no coincidence. I can't believe that's no coincidence. I think there's something about Tom that became fundamentally associated with the character of the Doctor himself. I think that's why he tends to overshadow everything else. Because, if Doctor Who was real, he'd be very like Tom Baker. I'm quite sure of that.
An awful lot of it was fun. The just process of working and helping on a bit on the script, trying to make the script work. I was the weekly reference point for the new directors. So it was all fun being Doctor Who. I think that the one thing that I miss about it, not here actually, because to some extent it still holds here, but in the United Kingdom where I'm beginning to be forgotten, which doesn't grieve me, that's the way it goes, sometimes you're something popular. The sweetest thing of it all was that for a period of 5 years or so, I was maybe the only man in England that don't talk to strange men didn't apply to. I had a marvelous instant intimacy with small children, which probably will never happen to me again. That was the sweetest thing. Actors have to grit their teeth, and you can't sit on a success. You've got to branch out somewhere else. It's not like being an accountant or something like that, where you rise in the corporation and get to the top that way. You only get to the top as an actor, as a performer, by branching out. You can't play safe. The minute you play safe, you're taking the terrible risk that finally you'll fall into that sort of vacuum of safety, and away will go your nerve or your desire for insecurity. I think there is an incipient desire to be insecure in every performer, really. Doctor Who screenplay is just in abeyance in an office in London because we never did raise the money and nobody was impressed with the screenplay except me, which disappointed me. I collaborated with a friend of mine to do a children's film called Operation Charlie Boy, which I brought to America, but I didn't suppose I'd have time to show it to anyone. It was about children making a stance against pollution, and I thought it was funny and grotesque, and no one else seems all that impressed, but never mind, something might happen to it. When I went straight from Doctor Who to play Oscar Wilde at the Chichester Festival in England, which is a big cultural event, and the trials of Oscar Wilde, it wasn't really a play so much as a theatrical adaptation made from transcripts of the trial. That was something of a success, actually. We could have taken it into the West End, but it didn't please me enough to do that. And then I went from that to something I've often wanted to do, which is to play Long John Silver in Treasure Island. That was fun. That went quite well too. Then I did Judge Brack in Hedda Gabler. That was the first Ibsen I'd ever played. That was a failure, actually. Although I escaped by the skin of my teeth. by my sheer effrontery, I suppose. Playing Judge Brack is a good part, but the production was considered a failure and we closed early. And then I did Sherlock Holmes for the BBC. And then latterly, at the end of last year, I've toured for about 20 weeks with the Royal Shakespeare Company in a contemporary play by Willie Russell called Educating Rita, which has just been filmed, I believe, with Michael Caine and Julie Walters. And that was fun in the provinces. That was a good play, a good production, and I was working with a comet of an actress called Kate Fitzgerald. Excellent, excellent. We did well. I don't think that I have anything original to observe about the difference between television and film, but it is obvious, isn't it, that television taking place practically by definition in a domestic context is more potent in the sense that that it happens in private, you see. While the movies happen in the dark, it really is a collective experience. It's private in the sense that you're in the dark, but you're conscious of other people. There's a formality of going out to the movies, about getting into a car or paying at the cash desk. When you're watching something on television, the extraordinary thing is there are so many other things going on sometimes, so that maybe therefore a particular moment isn't potent, but I mean, you can listen to television in your own home without any clothes on, when you're totally drunk or drugged, or making love, or washing dishes, or having a row, or discussing a marriage settlement. I think also at certain times, because it happens in the privacy of one's own home, I think frequently one watches television, one's critical faculties are slightly lowered, and therefore it can penetrate you. See, the formality of going out to a doctor or to the cinema or to the theatre strengthens your resolve slightly. I don't mean by that it makes you incapable of being moved or touched, by no means. But when one is alone, television gets to an awful lot of isolated and lonely people, a lot of unhappy people, and a lot of people who are tired. And it's very penetrating and insidious. I sometimes find myself being quite touched at something, and I have to blink and pull myself together and say, this is absolute rubbish, you know. It is subverting me. And then I go out and have a drink and get subverted in some other way. CBS and an Italian company called Productions are doing an 8-hour television film on Christopher Columbus. And I am being considered for that. Apparently I'm being hotly considered for it. And I go back next week. I go to Los Angeles next week and then on back to England to meet these people, I think on the 8th or 9th. And then they'll show me the script. I'm extremely skeptical, actually, that they'll get out a good script on Christopher Columbus. It's a hard subject to realize. A lot of stuff is hearsay or it's just letters or whatever. It'll be really hard to get away from the sort of wooden costume pieces which so predominate when they attempt those subjects in film or television. It's hard, really, to get the conflict, the anxiety of Columbus. But if it's decent, even if it's halfway decent, I don't mind giving it a go. It'll take a long time, though. It'll take about 8 months to film. That would be my first co-production, yes. Yeah. No. Never been asked. Mind you, had I been asked, most of the stuff I've seen on American television, I'd have thrown it back in their faces.
That was part of my next question.
Oh, what? I'd rather be a journalist than do some of the stuff I see on American television. Except when I see journalists on television, then I'd sometimes rather be dead. Not much, no. I mean, I admire it in some ways. For example, the quantity and the dilemma of the production of television in this country is immensely more complicated than it is in the UK. And so, to some extent, I suppose the achievement is extraordinary in a popular level. But, I mean, you're talking to me and asking me what I think. I mean, my opinion is just poor Tom Baker's opinion. No, I think most of it's lamentable. But then I'm not overpowered by what we produce in the United Kingdom, and we're supposed to be the best in the world, so we tell ourselves.
I remember we were going filming one day. I never used to know where we were going. I used to get on the bus and we would go. And it was about 6 o'clock at night, dusk was coming, we were going down a motorway. We came to a whole load of houses and Tom sat back and said, you know, Liz, if we stopped the bus now and I knocked on any one of these houses and said, excuse me, I'm the doctor, can I come in and watch myself? There's no one, he said, who'd say no. And it's such a sweet little nut. It's so simple, Doctor Who, but if you mess around with it too much, you haven't got anything. It is about relationships, really. I wish we'd had more money when we did it. But Tom was always full of ideas. Should we try it this way? And they'd say, oh, no, Tom. He said, well, it's all right, but I will have another idea in a minute, and that one might work. You know, you can be wrong 100 times, but just the once that you're right, that it adds to it, then it's worth keeping your input in. And, we used to have great laughs, we really did.
God knows what he thought about the idea of having a heroic boy in Doctor Who. I'm not sure he ever thought it was the bee's knees. I think he would rather have had sort of 25-year-old girls rather than sort of heroic teenage boys. In fact, I'm pretty sure of that because he once said, oh God, I hate this character. So that gave me a clue. God bless him. But I liked the character because it got me into Doctor Who, and that was enough for me. And I got to work with Tom.
Well, to the Americans, Tom is the Doctor very much. You know, I mean, he was the first one they saw, and who kind of launched the series. And then they picked up on the other ones. You know, once they were interested in Tom, they then went back, you know, to Felton and Pertwee, and even to Hartnell or to the later people. But Tom kind of grabbed the American market.
He could be very sweet. Tom could be very kind. He could be actually very generous to me, and his great quality, which I admire so much, is to be so funny and out of the ordinary. And the only thing I'd ever known that I wanted in my life was to be out of the ordinary. I don't want to be ordinary. I don't quite know what ordinary is, but I don't want to be it. And Tom wasn't it.
No, I'm not very preoccupied by science fiction or science fantasy. I have read a lot of Stanislaw Lem, the Polish writer, who fascinates me. And I've read a certain amount of writers like Asimov or Moorcock, or I like Kurt Vonnegut sometimes. He moves me very much. Of course, it's difficult to get past Vonnegut's first great success, I think, Slaughterhouse-Five, which I find so poignant, and his compassion after that experience, I suppose he was there, seems to run through most of his books, actually. But he's got a great heart. I'd like to do a piece with Vonnegut. I'd like him to write a script. Yes. I'd quite like to play Kilgore Trout. They won't let me, of course. Our industry is riddled with insurance brokers who couldn't spell the name Risk, never mind take one. I'm afraid I'm in the hands of cautious men and women. Well, it amuses me no end, and sometimes touches me. It's very nice to be the center of attention, albeit I realize that I mustn't confuse Tom Baker with being the center of attention. I just happen to be the little body that inhabits this fiction, which in turn inhabits the imagination of a large number of people who watch the program. But a matter of great fun. It's terrific when people are kind to each other, and for whatever reason, a program generates kindness. It's lovely to be smiled at all the time and to be embraced, and for people to be amused by me and for me to be amused by them. I like it all. I love it. How could one? You've seen what's been happening the last few days here. It's irresistibly joyful. I mean, people, of course, are contemptuous of such activities. They think that fans are just nuts or inadequate or whatever. It's not so. They're no more nuts nor more inadequate than dentists or businessmen who bore me to death in restaurants where I sit in San Francisco or New York. You know, those American businessmen. Oh, very solemn and always saying words like hopefully. And logistically speaking, Jeff, and they're always saying like that. And they wear those dreadful, boring suits, and they take each other so seriously I could scream. occasionally I do scream a bit, but I mean, people who make my life possible, people who write me loving letters, people who are nice to me in the streets, people who rush to be with me and smile. How can I not be touched by that kind of attention? How can I not have regard for them in return? Those people, there are people who've seen me in the last few days who are asking me when can they come and see me in London. No, I have enormous respect for the people who come to see me here, and I'm grateful to them.
We would camera rehearse, yes, so you'd be in rollers and whatever, and the makeup girls used to run after. Tom, can we just comb? Oh, darling, no, sorry, I'm too busy, I'm saving the universe. You know, oh, I'm not doing my hair. Just wonderful. Fantastically professional irreverence. I loved it.
I think Tom himself, by all accounts, is certainly a very interesting man. He's certainly unconventional in many senses. He's not, he doesn't come across when you hear him talking about himself as a person, but almost as an actor himself. You know, like this incredible. He's out of time himself. That's what it is. I think he's out of time, and he plays a Time Lord. So he plays a character who sort of transcends, you know, our existence in a way. You know, he's beyond there. He is an alien. Tom Baker was born an alien. He might have been born in Liverpool, but you know, he was born an alien. I'm quite sure.
He's a very distinctive actor indeed. Very distinctive actor. I've seen Tom in other things where you sit up and look at him, and you do. And rushing on ahead at a convention 4 years ago in the 93, you know, the prelude. I mean, Tom could get up on stage. He could recite the telephone book and people would be fascinated. He might not be talking about the programme at all. I remember at Hammersmith he went on talking about this dog in Muswell Hill. At the end I said, actually I know that dog, Tom, because I live in Muswell Hill.
Tom, the early years of Tom, I would say, you know, he was kind of riding the crest of a wave, you see, because it was flagging a little at the end of the town. The Pertwee era, though I say it myself, was a huge success, and John went out on a high note. So Tom inherited, you know, a prime-time successful show which everybody loved, and carried it, you know, for many, many years. Certainly, for the first 4 or 5 years of Tom's time, he did as well as we had done, or better, you know, and the viewing figures were excellent. They were up, you know, 10, 11 or 12 million, which were excellent for those days, you know. Obviously, it's kind of like the Conservative government. You stay in too long, you start facing problems.
The atmosphere on Doctor Who with Tom could be fraught, and there's no point in pretending that it couldn't. In some ways, I think I wasn't really equipped to deal with that fraughtness, because I really was too young and inexperienced and stupid. But he could suddenly be unbelievably sweet and generous. He was very kind. He was very nice to me in many ways.
I'm always overwhelmed by a kind of spontaneous kindness of people who don't know me. I'm overwhelmed because of their innocence, really, because they are obviously responding to a fiction and not to the real Tom Baker. And therefore I, who have some knowledge of my inadequacies, I'm overwhelmed by the accident of receiving such a response, which in a way is rather a cheat, really. It's a bit of a cheat. A cheat on the people who are being so kind to me, because they're not responding to me because they don't know me, and they're giving me the benefit of the doubt. How kind of so many people to give me the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, is the tremendous capacity of the Americans to be demonstrative, as against the traditional British Reserve. I noticed that curiously, it happens in the cinema. The audiences are much more participative. And in the theatre, certainly, last week in New York, it was amazing. But as to people responding to me, or I beg your pardon, to the character I've played in television, I've never had it on this scale here. Also, in England, Doctor Who, for example, is considered a children's programme. by most people, not by everyone, but by most people, or perhaps young adults in universities. But I think that's just a sign of nostalgia or homesickness among them. Here, it's mostly young adults who take it rather seriously, find it funny, and give me the benefit of a doubt. They ascribe to me the same qualities as the character I play. I mean, one only has one body and one imagination to filter a character through, so, I mean, there is a superficial resemblance, such as that it looks like the same body and sounds like the same voice and looks like the same eyes. Oh, but I'm nowhere near the sort of heroic stature and sense of courage that the character has for the fans who watch it. Not at all, no. Yeah, irony somewhere, perhaps along the line, yes. I think I said to someone today, one of the things I like about the character is his capacity to be surprised. And I have a capacity to be surprised.
I think he changed more in the later days. The ones I did, State of Decay and Horror of Fang Rock. Now, I think he'd maybe got more assured, you know, he'd sort of got, and he was slightly less scatty and slightly more authoritative, which was a good thing, you know, I mean, because obviously he can't, you know, you can overplay that side of things. But I think that was as time went on, he got more assured in the role. Yeah.
When we were doing Hand of Fear, the last one, I think that they were a little anxious that we must not film the last scene as the last scene, in case it got a little too, whatever, maudlin, whatever the word is. We used to often record out of order, but this particular time we recorded the end halfway through, so it was done. But I remember one of the last scenes that we did, it was where Eldad is wounded and we are climbing up this icy, slippery slope. And it was in the studio, so it wasn't desperately slippy, but you had to sort of pretend to slide back. And Tom slid back, and he thought that was quite funny. So he tooted up again, and he did a bigger slide back. And then I started, and we both did it. And it was like this kind of extra tension ball just going. Everyone was very cross with us, and we couldn't stop laughing. We kept going up and sliding down. Eldrad was the least amused, because she was so uncomfy. I could see her looking at us. And we just couldn't, and it was over. But that was the only time that actually, and it really, really was very sad leaving. I was very sad to leave, but I needed to go because I didn't ever want to be asked to leave. And I'd been with it so long, and you know, a producer, at some point, I was not Philip's choice, he inherited me, would want a new girl. And I thought, I cannot bear for someone to say, Liz, do you think really you should tootle off now? So I thought, right, it's really popular, I will go now. And Tom said, right, he said, I bet they'd bloody give me some other stupid name I can't pronounce, Esmeralda or Jonquil or Jessamine or something. And he gave me a party, had a party at his house. And there were all trees in the back garden, lots of trees. And he'd put all fairy lights in them. And just a joke, I said, oh Tom, I said, it's lovely. I said, do you always have it? No, I bloody don't. He said, I did it for you. It's lovely. Very, very sweet.
I always felt that there was a darker side to Tom's Doctor, and that you might think he might go for it for a moment, you know, that he might be tempted into evil, you think. You really know that Peter Davison is never going to be tempted into evil because he's too decent and he plays cricket, you know, and there's absolutely no way he's going to go over to the dark side of, you know, to cross the army.
I don't think Tom Baker or the Fourth Doctor was ever so much the role model as a dream uncle or a dream father or this fantasy figure like the Wizard of Oz. Who could transport you away from all this that's mundane, that's ordinary, you know. He was. I don't remember so much wanting to be him, but I wanted to meet him. I really wanted to meet him, and I wanted to meet, you know, his Doctor as well, because, like I said, you know, the two blend together so much. They fuse together to become one sort of one vague figure, you know, that's just so powerful and so strong.
I mean, if you see Tom at a signing with younger children, wonderful with them, absolutely, hello. And they tell him they're 9, you look 11 to me. You see them absolutely preen.
I'm very gregarious. I'm compulsively gregarious, but in rather a superficial way. I love being with people, but on the edge of people so that I can disappear. I very rarely carry a briefcase or a bag or anything. If I do, I keep it on my shoulder. I very rarely take my coat off so that I can slip away. I'm slightly interested in photography, really. I've got a very pretty camera, but it may be too late for me to take up photography. Curious enough, I know a lot of painters, and I go to exhibitions and things. I mean, 3 days ago, I was at the opening of the Royal Academy in London. No, not at all. Not at all. I have no accomplishments. I can't sing or dance or play an instrument or speak a foreign language. I'm totally untouched, actually, by any sort of... I'm certainly untouched by education. I think that might be an advantage. But I never got strapped into any kind of formal way of thinking. It leaves me in my own sort of twilight land of the purely automatic responder. I mean, I'm not proud of not having had much education, but then I didn't feel filled with regret, really.
But one of the projects we'd always wanted to do was we'd always seen this connection between the Doctor and Sherlock Holmes, and which is part of the reason why the Master was invented, because the Master is the Doctor's Moriarty, you know, it's his master villain, you see. So when we were doing the classic serial, I said to Barry, why don't we do a Sherlock Holmes, you know, and let's do one of the short novels, The Hound of the Baskervilles, again, you see, which is the best-known Holmes title, and it will make a good four-parter. And why don't we have Tom to play the Doctor? So that show was set up with the idea of Tom, we had Tom to play Sherlock Holmes. So that show was set up with the idea of Tom playing Sherlock Holmes, yeah. And in fact, we would say to directors, you know, not because that you go around and choose your director, offer them a job. Not would you like to direct The Hound of the Baskervilles, but would you like to direct Hound of the Baskervilles with Tom Baker playing Sherlock Holmes? He was always part of the package from very early on.
And I think, you know, Tom is associated with that slightly later period. Although the very, very last year, he's being held in check by another new producer. And he becomes very sombre on screen, very sort of funereal, and I think maybe he's almost playing it as if his time is up, way before he's actually said, you know, he's not going to be there.
Tom's contribution was really quite amazing. I think he's a wonderful Doctor. I think John was a wonderful Doctor. They're both very, very different, and I feel very, very fortunate that I worked with them both, and also very fortunate to have had the producers that I had. Barry Letts, who chose me, and Philip Hinchcliffe. They really were very, very supportive.
I mean, the fact that he had the part for 7 years seems to me that, in fact, it suited him to have the part for 7 years, and then he thought, right, that's right.
I think Jelly Babies has got a lot to do with it. And I think the hat has a lot to do with the scarf. Of course, I have a vast amount to do with its ongoing success and popularity too, but I think Tom also made a contribution.
Tom Baker was by far and away the most successful Doctor in terms of rating viewers, identification, you know, merchandising. You know, he was, it's like a tidal wave spreading out before him.
Tom is very elusive. I mean, you never really get to know Tom well. I mean, he's always very friendly, very pleasant, very charming, and he talks at you 19 to the dozen. Whether you actually know the real person, I don't know. I think he's actually kind of quite a private person, you know, and maybe even a shy person underneath it, you know, who doesn't want to come to. I mean, the last time I actually met him was in a bookshop in Charing Cross Road, and I was buying an old thriller by a writer called Manning Coles, who, you know, wrote in the 40s and 50s, long forgotten now. And I was buying this, and somebody sort of looked over my shoulder and said, "Oh, Manning Coles, Tommy Hambledon, yes, I like those," and it was Tom. And it was really a nice kind of moment, you know, to meet him again and to find that we enjoyed the same obscure writer. That was a very kind of Tom-like sort of encounter, I think.
Now, you talk about icons here, and that is what Tom Baker is as the Fourth Doctor. He is an icon.
I am nomadic, yes. And even when I stay somewhere, I change my telephone number a lot. Like sometimes every 6 weeks, my friends are so treacherous, they give my phone number away. And I don't like that. I like when the phone rings to know that it can only be one of about 8 people. Then I can pick it up with great confidence. Yes, I am nomadic and rather secretive, I'm afraid, and sometimes perhaps furtive.